All right, welcome to another edition of the Level Up podcast. Level Up is developed to facilitate challenging, real, and raw conversations with minorities about their unique experiences in the workforce. And today we have the Doug McCollough, legend leader in the Columbus community right now. I have the pleasure of sitting down with Doug, and he's the CIO of the city of Dublin and recognized for smart city and intelligent community innovation. But before I get into his LinkedIn version of his bio, I'll let him introduce a little bit more. Doug, could you tell us a little bit about your backstory, like where you from, what led you to your journey to CIO, and some of the things that, some of the events that happened in between?
Well, sure. I'll try not to go too far back, but I'll tell you, at the risk of alienating a lot of people, I'm from Southfield, Michigan, right outside of Detroit.
Okay.
And another thing that some people know about me, but everybody doesn't, is that I'm a musician. So I studied jazz composition at Berklee College of Music, and that was my life. That's where I was going. I was going to be a working musician. I studied jazz. A decade later, I wanted to do something different with my life, and I went to University of Toledo to get a degree in information systems and operations management. My wife and I had 2 kids at the time, and Ohio beckoned. Ohio is really the place to be. I can't sing its praises enough, especially when you're raising a family. But my first gig in the Central Ohio area was at Lucent Technologies, which used to be over there on Broad Street. They've been bought a few times, but I learned a lot about telecommunications, about software development, and about project management, and that's where I was. And from there, I joined the state of Ohio. I got my first state job. I've been with 4 different state agencies since then, and began climbing the experience ladder, learning all the other aspects of technology, whether it be infrastructure and operations, security, everything from data center management, virtualization, as well as on the software side, project management side. And I learned the ins and outs of kind of organizational success and leadership and how to work with people in order to move yourself where you wanted to be. I definitely have had some assistance and support along the way from other leaders in this region who gave me a shot, acted as a mentor, acted as a sponsor, exposed their network to me, shared positions with me. And I try to do that now with everybody that I can as well. But I had an opportunity to be a director and then a CIO, back to a deputy CIO. I did leave the state of Ohio and become CIO for the city of Richmond, Virginia, because at the time I wasn't seeing the opportunities in the state that I wanted to be seeing. And that got me into municipalities and cities, which is a whole different animal. And you can get really right next to problems and opportunities and interesting situations in cities. So I was bit by that bug. City of Dublin called me and said, hey, I noticed that you're from Central Ohio. Are you interested in coming back in this area? And I became the first CIO for the city of Dublin, which has tasked me with a lot of innovation and emerging technologies and really opening up a brand new conversation. So that's where I am today.
Ohio.
Yeah.
How'd you end up in Ohio being a Michigan guy? I know you just kind of touched on that a little bit, but that has to be definitely an interesting situation, working with the city and being from essentially the rivals of the city, So
Yeah.
that's interesting.
I grew up in Michigan. I was actually born in Toledo, Ohio. And in the Detroit area, you're going to know a lot of back and forth between Toledo and Detroit. I mean, they might as well be one city, honestly. But yeah, definitely grew up in Michigan. I left Michigan when I was 18 and I went to the East Coast. And I really learned a lot about the world by leaving the Midwest and seeing the East Coast. And when you go to school in Boston, you're going to see DC and Philadelphia and Atlanta and everywhere. But then I really realized that I was a Midwesterner. My wife was from Toledo, Ohio, and so it was an easy decision to come back to Ohio. But then University of Toledo honestly just had the best deal in an adult, non-traditional student getting a whole new education. And so I sing the praises of Ohio now. My friends and family are going to be watching from Michigan, but I'm an Ohioan now. This is home. We've put roots down here. I love it. I still love Detroit. I think it's a very special place, and I think that it's very misunderstood in terms of, you know, if you're not from there and you watch some of the devastation of the last economy, you're going to say, you know, I don't really know anything about Detroit. But the golden-hearted people, my family is all up there, and so you got to sort of walk the line in between those two, you know.
Man, I'm from Chicago, and I think I can say the same and essentially parrot that same statement that you made. I mean, it's pretty misunderstood, but you know, I guess it's a good segue to kind of talk a little bit about, like, or not necessarily even talk about, but just give the praises to the graduates that have to, you know, go through this pandemic and trying to figure out what their next moves are going to be. You spoke a lot about your alma mater. I'm repping my alma mater right now, so super kudos to all of those folks. But I mean, back into this, we talked a little bit about your journey, but like, tell us what does a CIO of a city do? You know, we kind of understand like what a chief information officer or would do at a company like a Nationwide or you know, things of that nature. What does your day-to-day look like?
That's an interesting question. Most cities don't have CIOs, so this was a kind of a gangster move on the part of Dublin. They stepped out and said having an IT director is pretty normal for the size staff that you have. But a chief information officer looks beyond the operational technology of the organization. What we'll say often is that in IT, we keep the trains running, we keep the lights on, we make sure that different departments have what they need in order to be productive. IT is a cost center. It does not make revenue. It is essentially a cost. It's always being cut. It's never the hero. But what the city of Dublin wanted to do, and some cities have CIOs. I will look over at Chicago, for example, or Boston, the big ones. My job is the way that was described to me originally, look over the horizon, look and see what's coming towards us, what can hurt us, or what opportunities are we going to miss because we just didn't recognize them. And the city wanted to have someone who was studying that stuff, developing the relationships, building up a reputation that could really change the game for the city. I do recommend this for a lot of cities, even small ones, to try and figure out how to do something different to really change your economy. So I don't just stick around in the technology area. My work impacts the economic development of the city because it attracts jobs, technology companies, for example, whose workers pay payroll taxes. And so our economy rises by how attractive we are to the technology industry or other industries that have, you know, basically high-paying jobs. It's a virtuous circle, and it all works together. You can do that through smart cities and intelligent communities and interesting projects that intrigue technology companies. Let me just put a point on that. It used to be that technology companies would locate someplace and attract the best workers to come and move there and live there. Now, if a bunch of technology workers really like a place, they will move the company to go there. And that has been our strategy. How can we be attractive to tech workers? Because if I can put 20 engineers in one neighborhood, I can attract a company there. And so many of our smart city and our technology initiatives are oriented around being the kind of place that a modern tech worker would want to live. So that's a part of what I do.
Yeah, and I guess I can really see how your diverse background would allow you to see some of those opportunities also. Not just being a minority or African-American male, but just a diversity of work experience that you bring from the public sector into this more, I don't even know what you call it. It's very interesting to understand like all the ins and outs of how a city works and how you make that, how you're driving those innovations through technology, especially now as we're marching towards the second phase of this pandemic. I can't even say the end or anything normal. In regards to tech innovation, like what are we doing? What are we thinking right now? Where do we want to go? and how we like what are some of the interim approaches that we're thinking about to get us to where we're trying to get to? I know we're already like the smart city and things of that nature, but where are we thinking future forward?
You know, it's interesting because when we use the term disruption, we do think about the private sector. What comes to mind will be an Amazon that disrupted or an Uber that disrupted. But in public sector, we often don't recognize that when emerging technology enters the scene, everybody gets disrupted. Universities are disrupted, nonprofits, churches are disrupted. And so we were in the process of being disrupted before the pandemic hit. And the other word that I'll use is digital. We've all been in this process of transforming into a more digital organization where individuals are able to interact with their world using devices and data and sensors and data and analytics and those kinds of things. Then the pandemic hit, and we realized that we need to accelerate all of that. And so that's why now we're, instead of face-to-face with a camera, we're sitting here digitally conducting this. And we found that it's cheaper, it's more efficient, it's easier. And so that is kind of where we're going. Just from the perspective of a city, and I'll say a community, what's interesting is that being touchless is pretty important. You know, it was when the bird flu first hit that we started having the air dryers show up in all the bathrooms. I don't know if you noticed that we stopped having, you know, paper towels and things and the air dryers that you didn't have to touch, you just hold your hands underneath. It was the bird flu that made a lot of that stuff happen. And I think we're going to find that interactions between people to access their services, including transportation and mobility, education, nonprofit, access to food, entertainment, all sorts of things. Even the way people go to parks nowadays or play sports is being impacted, and digital technology and smart is going to disrupt all of that. That's honestly where I believe we're going.
Okay, how do communities thrive in general? I mean, because we have the infrastructure, so we think, right? We have the technology in place. We have really intelligent people here. How do we thrive? How do we put all of that together to make this make sense?
It's interesting. So I need an hour to go through that and say it all. But I will say that, first of all, communities can improve the quality of their revenue. I spoke about that a little bit before. Not necessarily the quantity of it, but the stability of their revenue so that they're not spiking all the time, and they can plan better for the longer term. Planning is how communities begin to thrive. But I'm going to move in another direction. Quality of place and quality of life are what make people thrive. And that's not necessarily a poor community or rich community or a diverse community or a non-diverse community. That means that when people are very happy with the experience they're having where they live. Now, I personally believe that people are going to be happier when they have economic stability, when they are in a diverse environment, where their health is very good, where they have access to transportation and many of those things. So I could probably give you a list of 10 to 20 things that make communities thrive. And if they're missing, those communities don't thrive. And if they're present, those communities jump ahead. So speaking just about Dublin now, Dublin is thriving. They have done a lot of things right. They have a AAA bond rating. They have excellent roads and schools and those kinds of things. But there is absolutely no reason why other communities, why every community cannot thrive in the same way. But many communities, first of all, don't have the resources to have a CIO or to put all of the puzzle pieces together. And forget about the CIO. The planning department in Dublin is second to none, first class. And so when we can get planning functions, digital disruption, quality of life types of things into more communities, all of us will begin to thrive.
Yeah, I know. And coming from Chicago, you get to hear a lot of things like about the food deserts and red line areas and things of that nature, but you don't necessarily hear about the information deserts and the lack of access to internet in certain instances. And we're in 2020, and that's hard to believe, but there's still a lot of communities that deal with that. What are some of the things, I guess, that you can see on the horizon that maybe you have worked on, that kind of speak or provide solutions to that situation
Yeah,
where given access to information and also internet opportunities and things of that nature?
that's also a passion of mine, and I will hold up one example. But one good way of thinking about that, the terms that I've heard are digital access, equity, and inclusion. You have two of those, you don't have it all. You need all three of those. And a really great conversation was had in the last few months by one of the current cohorts of Leadership Columbus, who pulled together people who were subject matter experts in digital equity, access, and inclusion. And one of the things that came out of that conversation, it included, by the way, internet service providers, community activists, lawyers, at least one CIO. I was present in the room, and we had some really great conversations about why does this happen and what needs to be done about it. They actually have formed a loose organization called Digital Columbus that is beginning to compile data and information and learnings about what's happening in Columbus. And in this term, we're thinking about Greater Columbus, the region. So what can be done? One of the things that came out of that conversation is that you can't just slap broadband down in a community and people can't afford it. Or if they have internet and don't know how to use it, or if they have internet but don't have devices, or if they have devices but don't know how to use those devices.
Yeah.
And the pandemic has been an extraordinary learning opportunity for us to be able to see, you send a bunch of people home and you give them a Chromebook and you say, now start learning. And you guys, you work from home, go. And people say, I don't know how to use this Chromebook. And you can put as much internet in front of me as you want. If I can't access it, then I'm not going to be able to deal with it. You also have situations where there's one Chromebook in the home, and now you got to go to the doctor, you got to go to work, two kids have to go to school on it, and someone else is taking courses. So that is kind of the access and inclusion kind of things that have to go along with that. And this affects all communities. It affects rural communities and urban, wealthy communities and needy communities. And the school situation has brought light to all of that. I don't want to paint a dark picture, though. We can do a lot. I've also been watching a lot of companies step up who brought devices and Chromebooks and internet access and hotspots and those kinds of things. Some of the internet service providers stepped up, and it's quick and dirty. It's not the best way of doing it. And it's frustrating to a person like me because I say, oh, it turns out we had $1 trillion, huh? Maybe if we had put this stuff together, we would be a more resilient community. But we have to uplift the concept of resilience today. We don't even need to wait until the pandemic is over and say, instead of just tossing Chromebooks out there or PCs or iPhones and kind of struggling through getting people connected, let's be more systematic about it. Let's gather data and let's have conversations with people. I can tell you in communities of color, one of the reasons why people are mistrusting of some of the technology is because of information that they need. They need to have a conversation about security and privacy and Big Brother and am I being watched and am I being tracked? And as long as those fears exist, which are legitimate, then people are not going to have access to the same digital life as people who don't have those fears. So it's a big picture. There's a lot that goes into people not having the same levels of access.
That begs the question, and I don't want to stay too much on this conversation, but we spoke a little bit about like the inclusion and also the educational piece that's really big there. And I know we'll get there a little bit later in this conversation about the work that you've been doing through and with Black Tech Columbus, which is really cool. But how do we get more boots on the ground to continue to educate not just Black people, but minorities in general who live and support these communities that don't necessarily have access to the resources about what these towers are that we're building in your communities and things of that nature? So
that's a really good question. And it's one of the things that motivates my life.
Mm.
We need to do that. We're not going to fix or address many of these things just by putting more technology in certain communities, target communities, I would call them. I've heard them called communities of opportunity. We need to be more diligent and present and having conversations about what's unique about those communities and how they interact with technology. Because some of these security fears, other communities don't have them. But then again, they're not watching people get killed every day by police, so you're going to have a different perspective on that. And so as we put cameras and 5G sites and we run data and analytics on things, and we have large segments of the community which are completely unaware of how is it that Amazon knows exactly what I want to buy before I tell them. And
Mm-hmm.
it's scary, but it also doesn't have to be scary. If you understand it, you can participate in that technology from a position of knowledge. So who's
Mm-hmm.
going to do that? And one of the things that I recognize, and I know we'll talk about Black Tech Columbus, is that the community of people who are going to be present and credible to that community really did not exist. But we do have technology professionals from every community, including, I'm going to say, rural communities and just all sorts of different kinds of communities who are just trying to get by, just trying to make it. But we haven't organized ourselves to go back into the communities we came from and be present, just to talk about that phone, that camera that's up there, that data is analyzing you, that wearable camera that the police may have now. We demanded that they have that, but we don't really understand how they work. How can we take advantage of and benefit from the technology that's already there? That's a matter of education. I believe that it's people like myself who need to make that happen.
Mm-hmm. I think so too. I think all invested individuals and communities and groups alike have an obligation to reach back and provide support, especially from the communities that they come from. My grandmother used to say it all the time, it takes a village to raise a child. So for you to not pour back into the things that poured into you is the ultimate crime in my book. So definitely agree with you there. That's one of the reasons I have so much respect for you, because you don't just talk about it, you're actually doing the work. And before we get to Black Tech 614, let's talk about some of the work that you do with women, in the tech space. And women it's not a lot of women in tech, it's a lot. I start to see a lot more women in tech now that are starting to get some opportunities. But could you speak to the work that you've been doing in that space?
I had established some relationships with colleagues. And, it's interesting, when you are a supporter of women, it's not necessarily work. It's funny. You can just help by not being that guy, and help remove the barrier of that guy. I've learned that. It's not necessarily my role to uplift a huge amount of people. It's my role to remove barriers, particularly among men. But I've had some colleagues and friends, and I got invited to speak at a Women in Technology conference, and I found my group. I really enjoyed being able to speak from the perspective of someone who was disadvantaged. And I think I have a understanding of what some women are going through because of that disadvantage. It's unfair, it's infuriating, and I can look in their eyes and see how they kind of talk about it. And I say, I know that look. Yeah, this is not fair. So we have something in common there. And through some aligning of the stars, I don't know how, I have found myself as an influential CIO in the region, and people listen to me. And so I feel like I have a responsibility to make certain statements that, it moves people. So anyway, that's kind of how I got started there. But then the relationships I have in technology, I know a lot of people in security. I know a lot of people in every sub aspect of technology. I have a lot of strong women in my life, and I have a certain amount of respect. And some of this stuff, I think, is just a matter of holding the right attitude about where we are here. I have two daughters. My wife is a very strong individual, and she tells me about her experience in life. And so some of what I've learned has come from me complaining to her about what she needs to do. So she'll say, yeah, I got this problem and that problem. I say, well, you need to just tell them X, Y, Z. And I did this for a while
Not
before
that
at some point
simple.
right, she looked at me and she said, look, it's different for you. I was like, no, I've done this and I can tell you, you need to just tell them this. And she said, it doesn't work that way for women. And that hurt me. It hit me because I realized that I was ignorant and I need to learn and begin to listen more than I was talking and not assume that what I was able to do was necessarily going to work with them. Making statements like that, I think, has made some women very appreciative. And I think that they would like to lift me up so that I can help continue that conversation with other men in particular. And I'm going to chalk my recognition up to that reputation.
That's a one of the most supreme realization of what diversity really means. You know, the diaspora of diversity is what I call it. And that's a super humbling feeling when you think that as an African-American male, we go through we have to experience certain headwinds in our career that are just there, you know? And most of the times, the people that are doing those or place those barriers or things in our wake or whatever, they don't necessarily understand or really know the brevity of what we have to deal with, and it's really not understood. It's like we have to continue to, you know, break through glass windows and doors just to stand out there on that glass ledge, you know, once we finally get to where we're going to. So super excited about the work that you're doing. I mean, you may not see it as work, you know, but it's definitely the necessary things for women, because they represent a massive opportunity for us, and they grow so many great businesses just by being there. You know, I don't know where I would be without the women in my life, you know. But to talk a little about Black Tech, you co-founded Black Tech Columbus, or more affectionately known as Black Tech 614, along with 10 other co-founders to create an authentic space for Black tech professionals to connect, collaborate, and create. And I think I've almost know that model a lot myself. I'm not necessarily a tech professional, but I'm in so much tech that it doesn't make a sense as to why I'm not a tech professional. So, and I've also been going to a lot of things that Black Tech has been doing in the community. Could you speak about what Black Tech is for those viewers who really don't know what it is, and speak about some of the work that you guys are doing?
I appreciate being able to talk to you about that. You've been to a couple of events, so you know that a lot of what Black Tech Columbus does is a feeling. You walk in that room and you see other professionals there, and you feel at home, and you can breathe. You know, you can breathe that oxygen. And so I think one of the aspects of it is just to exist. I had been having a lot of conversations with people about their experience in the technology field. And, you know, many of those people became founders. But also, you know, you go to a National Black MBA Association meeting, or, you know, you hang out with Black lawyers, or, you know, Black policemen, and there's a lot of people within their industry who connect together. And what I found is that technology professionals in Smart Columbus, in this, you know, startup environment, were not connected. And so I just kind of wonder why that was the case.
Could you tell me a little bit about some of the work that you're doing to kind of drive more diversity and inclusion in Columbus, and also some of the things you've been doing, or work, not necessarily you, but that you have eyes on to attract a lot more talent to Columbus?
It's funny because, again, I didn't set out to do this work. I want to do the right thing. And I talk to people, you know, since we began this journey, people come up to me and they tell me about what's going on with them. Whether that is, hey, I'm in the job and they're hiring, and I want to see some people get some opportunity. Can you spread the word? Or, you know, Doug, I'm dealing with this here and I'm having an experience, and I think it's bad. and I don't know whether I'm overreacting or people need people to talk to compare notes with. And when you're in a place where no one shares many of the same characteristics of you, they don't come from a similar background or a community of those things, they're not comfortable. And I realize that a lot of companies have a lot of minority staff or diverse talent, whatever term you want to use, and they were losing them and they didn't understand why. They don't seem to be happy here. They don't seem to be fitting in. And I'm like, okay, we need to have a conversation about this, because if you can't understand why you're not getting the most out of everyone you could, you're losing money and the community is losing opportunities to thrive in your organization. These are great jobs. You're paying well. And there's an entire world who you're not getting access to and they're not getting access to you. And I'm stunned, frankly, that people just don't understand this. And again, my wife and other people have said, well, Doug, they don't understand it. You're going to have to do something to help people understand. So this isn't necessarily a mission or anything like that. It's just a conversation. And I find myself in environments, whether I'm asked to speak on a panel or to be on a podcast with you where someone asks the question, I speak to it and somebody learns something. And this kind of person by person work that you got to deal with an individual, come to an understanding and move on to the next individual. And that's kind of how I see getting this work done. However, I do want to mention Black Tech Columbus again, because part of the value there is that we will have a conversation. There'll be 30 or 45 of us in a room. Now, all of those people have a set culture and view of the world that they carry out as well. And that's how you build a movement. We need
So
a
let's
lot
talk
of different
about
movements. So
let's talk about that for the viewers who don't know or aren't recognized Black Tech Columbus. What is Black Tech Columbus and what do you guys do?
So Black Tech Columbus is a collection of Black tech professionals who to connect, collaborate, and create. And it's an environment where people can be their authentic selves and just chill and connect with each other, get to know each other. It's an opportunity to build a network and those kinds of things. However, it does have specific activities in which it has learning communities, it does professional development, and it does social networking, which is important. Now, that's just a happy hour or it's just a pizza and beer, but we need a space where we can connect and do that, that we can feel very comfortable with. It's not exclusive to Black people. So if you were to come to one of our happy hours, you should be seeing some white people there. You should be seeing, a number of other people who are quite comfortable in that environment. By the way, if you don't know any Black people in the field and you don't have any Black friends or connections or network, you should come to Black Tech Columbus and meet a lot of people. A lot of people are doing that, and they're finding that they have a better time recruiting and, understanding this community better. Bottom line is we needed a space where we could educate each other, where we could do some co-mentoring. I have a lot of people saying, can you be my mentor? And I ask other people, can they be my mentor? And we don't have enough mentors. So we're going to have to co-mentor, which means 4 or 5 of us get in a room and have conversations, advice to each other. But we need to know each other in order to do that. And Black Tech Columbus was an opportunity to create a space where people could make that connection, and it's permanent.
Yeah, I think it's a great space, and I definitely see opportunities for you guys to continue to expand. And I've had some conversations offline with you and some of the members some of those co-founders also about some of the things that you want to do future forward. But what were some of the challenges for some people who may want to create their own type of groups like this in cities outside of Columbus that may look like this? What are some of the challenges that you guys faced in trying to pull this off, and some of the opportunities that you see moving forward?
Yeah, what's interesting, we have heard from Black tech professionals in other cities who are struggling with this. And, you look at Cleveland, for example, they have a very large community that's just not connected in that way. And in some senses, this stuff explodes very quickly once you light a fire. And that's what we found. We had an event at the the Pelican Room. And we packed that place with 150, 175 people immediately because people were hungry for this. So I think there's a certain way that you could organize it that attracts people's attention. We do a lot through social media because we have found that this community organizes and communicates in different ways than the majority community. And so where certain kinds of conferences and events were how traditional things get organized, we found that Instagram, Twitter, and LinkedIn were how this community really communicates with each other. And so we need to not be ashamed of being different, to embrace the fact that we are a different community, and that helps a lot. I do want to mention, though, not only for other Black technology professionals or any industry professionals who want to organize, first of all, put the call out and gather people around and just always be communicating. But we're excited about supporting other minority and diverse types of groups. I spoke to Zettabytes, who is organizing LGBTQ plus technology professionals. I did some writing on LinkedIn talking about Latinx technology professionals. And everyone's going to organize in their own way, but this is an opportunity to make sure that everyone has a seat at the table, everyone is included, every voice is heard, and quite frankly, recently I really want to deal with disabled technology professionals, because again, you can see that look in their eye and saying, I'm disadvantaged, I need support, so that is what I would advise to different groups. We need to connect together and support each other in this as well.
Because I wanted to roll right into how the work that you spoke of was really served as like that bridge to be able to connect the people to opportunities to remove barriers and to promote change and initiatives ranging from smart and connected cities to IT workforce development, expanding broadband access, and also connected and autonomous vehicles being like almost the backbone of how these cities are being smart. It's really centered around like the transportation, right? How they're leveraging IoT and all these other things. And it's kind of expanded from that. If you want to speak, yeah, please.
Well, I mean, I would just respond by saying that one of the realizations I think those of us who want to see a diverse community thrive have made is that we can't afford to leave a single person behind. And it's valuable, and we're growing by 1 million people in our region. Each and every one of those new people is going to add to our economy and make things great. But we have the potential of misorganizing it, of creating a non-inclusive community, which is going to fall down. That's where we'll get overcrowding and spikes in unemployment and food deserts and transportation deserts and inequity in broadband. But we have the tools to organize ourselves so that all of Greater Columbus is well organized and inclusive, and that to me is smart. So as a technology person, I often get asked about the technology, but the technology is honestly pretty easy. The devices are going to work, the network works, the data and analytics is pretty effective, it works. The question is, as a community, can we be a smart community in terms of how we allow people to engage with that? And it's not going to be the same in every neighborhood in Columbus. What works in Dublin is not going to work in Bexley, or is not going to work in Whitehall, or is not going to work in Gahanna, or is not going to work on the south side, So we have to organize the technology around the needs and benefits of the community and not the other way around.
So what would be your call to action to our viewers from that perspective? Like something tangible that they can do to help.
I would like to give like 3 tangible steps, but what comes to mind is an attitude and a commitment to learning and communicating and to being patient. You cannot afford to say, that sounds technical, I don't understand it. You have to get into it. So I'm looking for that commitment to learn, and I'm looking for an attitude of patience and hope. I think if the only thing we see in these emerging technologies is risk and threat, then we're going to react that way. But we need to think about how these technologies could benefit our neighborhoods. And for a lot of our neighborhoods, they don't see that at all. I want to get into those neighborhoods and have that conversation. But my call to action would be to embrace hope, to embrace a potential positive outcome, and have an attitude of moving forward towards that.
And that's it, man. I mean, thank you again for sitting out here on this couch with us, this virtual couch, and having this really cool conversation. Really impactful, really necessary, and I think very timely. To the viewers, I hope you guys enjoyed this episode of Level Up Podcast. And thanks for tuning in once again. Remember, leave a like, comment, smash that subscribe button, and share with your friends. Hashtag Level Up, and we're out.